simmering fears of imagined subversions, even as they tried to escape the label of McCarthyism. All had big plans and glorified visions in which they played the crowning roles. Now that we at least have access to the full sweep of the records of Joe McCarthy's transgressions, we can see that his rise and reign also go a long way to explaining the astonishing ascension of President Donald J. Trump. While some seek comfort in the belief that Trump's election was an aberration, the truth is that he is the latest of a bipartisan queue of fanatics and hate peddlers who have tapped into America's deepest insecurities. In lieu of solutions, demagogues point fingers. Attacked, they aim a wrecking ball at their assailants. When one charge against a manufactured enemy is exposed as hollow, they lob a fresh bombshell. If the news is bad, they blame the newsman. McCarthy was neither the first nor the last, but he is the archetype, and Trump owes much to McCarthy's playbook. That playbook is invariably the key. It transformed Joe McCarthy from a crank. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. We have a new video up over at thomhartmann.com about conspiracy theories. Abby Richards came up with a kind of a hierarchy of conspiracies, maybe a variation on the old Maslow hierarchy. And it goes from actual conspiracies to maybe this was a conspiracy, maybe not, we have questions, to this is kind of crazy stuff, but who knows, flying saucers, for example, to actual science denial, conspiracy theories that actually serve to promote the interests of a particular industry or wealthy individuals, to the totally crazy stuff, the flat earth, the reptilian overlords, and all that kind of thing, conspiracy theories that can do tremendous damage. And, one of those being one of the conspiracy theories that, brought two Republicans into Congress this year. So anyhow, I lay the whole thing out with a new video for our supporters over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It is Anything Goes Friday, taking your calls for the day. Remarkable. Ronald in Chicago. Hey, Ronald, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Ronald?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can, yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Okay, thanks for taking my call. I had an idea, Tom. Maybe it's not practical, and I don't know how practical it is, or if it's ever been done. But what is wrong with, since Joe Biden took this gamble to do what he did, because he knew, and we all knew that it was going to be messy. But he had enough courage to do it when the other ones didn't. Why not take it a step further? What's wrong with President Biden taking a little trip to Afghanistan?
Well, right now Afghanistan is controlled by the Taliban, so I don't think it would be a good idea to drop the President of the United States in the middle of that.
Well, I understand that part, but I thought my idea was a little personal intervention would go a long ways and show where he's at. I know it's not. He's the president. It may not be a practical thing to do, but there ought to be some kind of way that we can resolve this without going through all the problems that we're doing.
Yeah, he is going to be addressing the nation today, and I think that we're probably going to learn a lot from that. There's no simple solution here. We're wrapping up a 20-year occupation that George W. Bush lied us into, and then Donald Trump set up a complete disaster by shutting down 3 years ago, basically shutting down the visa program for the translators. And thus there's this, a huge backlog. And, I think Biden's doing the best he can. Mike in Lomita, California. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for hearing my call. Just wanted to tell everyone in California, if you're 18 or will be 18 on the 14th of September, the best thing you can do to fight COVID-19 and to keep representative government extant in the United States is to make sure you have voted in the recall election. You should have already received the ballot by mail. If you're not registered, you only have 10 more days to register on time.
To vote.
So everyone, please get out and vote.
Yeah, if you're in California, this is such a power play by the hard right. You know, they want to get this right-wing talk show host, Larry Elder, and he's got the entire network of right-wing hosts all across California pushing this really, really hard. And
the latest poll I saw had it just about a dead heat.
Right. And it's all going to depend on turnout. And, you know, like I said, there's this entire network of right-wing radio stations across, all across California who are pushing people really hard to show up. And just like they did with Gray Davis. And they ended up replacing Gray Davis with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And if they replace, you know, Gavin Newsom now with Larry Elder, you're going to see, you know, Elder has said he's going to undo all the mask mandates, and he's going to undo the vaccine mandates, and he's going to turn California into Alabama, and isn't that going to be great? And, you know, go ahead.
If they succeed, too, you can expect to see this happening in other states where they will get all of a sudden new recall provisions in their constitutions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, looking at what's going on here, or at least in those states where you've got a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor, you will definitely see that happen. Mike, thanks a lot for the call. Jerry in San Francisco. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Came across a real interesting article. Came out in the New York Magazine by Azmet Khan. Name of it's called Ghost Students, Ghost Teachers, Ghost Schools. And she went to the countryside, as she calls it, in Afghanistan in 2019 to take a look at the schools that we have built through the trillions of dollars that we spent in Afghanistan. And she found that out of the 50 schools in the battlefield, only 10% were built.
Wow.
The rest of them were hollowed out buildings. Others were built, but those children were being taught at mosques in the village.
Huh.
And
so it was a great run for the contractors.
Exactly, and the warlords who took care of that area.
Right.
And so then she did further investigation to find out, well, you know, why didn't we put a stop to it over 20 years of having these warlords, drug kings, and just people who led death squads who ran these areas? Why didn't we stop it? And one of the positions or connections to getting that money for schools is that these guys, these warlords, were to be counterterrorism,
right,
who would enforce the counterterrorism in that area.
Which, of course, they didn't do. Yeah. Yeah, we were basically trying to pay off everybody. It's you can't use bombs and you can't use money to change people's hearts. It just generally doesn't work. Jerry, thank you for that.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We are live with Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Back with your calls after this break at the bottom of the hour. Our book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929.
Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest export, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, in an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton.
small businesses, and therefore the company didn't have to pay for unemployment insurance, didn't have to pay for workman's compensation if somebody got injured, didn't have to offer them any health insurance. In fact, basically couldn't even do it. And there's a whole bunch of other benefits that are associated, and protections that you actually get, state and federal protections that you get as an employee that you do not have available to you as a contractor. Well, it passed because of millions of dollars from Uber, and now the fallout is happening. Companies across California are starting to fire their workers and telling them, we'll hire you back. I give examples in our new video over at thomhartmann.com. And welcome back to Anything Goes Friday, taking your calls and, thoughts, concerns, questions, rants, whatever it may be. Mick in Vashon Island, Washington. Hey, Mick, what's up?
What's on my mind today is George Jackson and his 50th anniversary of
the Black Panther, George Jackson?
Yes, Field Marshal George Jackson, who passed away on August 21st of 71.
Mm-hmm.
He made a profound impact on me. I was at his funeral and was given one of his funeral pieces of literature. And on the back, there's a reading by Claude McKay, which I often read to myself because it's one of the things that was instrumental in changing my position on things. If you don't mind and have the time, I'd like to read it.
Sure. If it's less than 2 or 3 sentences, Mick, you can read it. If it runs more than that, please don't.
I understand. I'll skip to the last part of it then. We kinsmen must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave. And for their 1,000 blows, deal one death blow. What through before us lies the open grave. Like men, we'll face the murderous pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back.
There you go.
And,
great
and as you know, well, he gave up his life, and we talk a lot about what Black Lives Matter. Well, the ones in the beginning, Fred Hampton, George Jackson, these people were instrumental in getting this movement going.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to make sure that we didn't.
I mean, you read, just last year I was reading the biography of Huey Newton, or actually his autobiography, and it's astonishing the bravery of these guys.
Thank you. He was at George's funeral, along with Bobby Seale.
Yeah, it was just the absolute bravery, and then you look at what John Lewis went through, and all the people down in at the Edmund Pettus Bridge and all that stuff. I mean, those are those little iconic moments that we remember, but there were literally millions of those moments, and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people involved in the movement, but thousands of them who really were willing, and some did, lay down their lives. I mean, in Mississippi, I was mentioning that this wannabe bomber yesterday was on his Facebook feed, was reposting Donald Trump Jr. memes. Philadelphia, Mississippi is where Schwimmer, Cheney, and Goodman were murdered, and 3 civil rights workers. And so therefore, that's where Ronald Reagan went to give his first speech about states' rights, which was Reagan's way in 1980 of saying that he was, with the Southern white racists. Well, that was also where Donald Trump Jr. gave his first political speech. And he made a big point of saying so when he gave that speech to this all-white audience at the Nebosha, or however you say it, county fair. He said, the last person here was Ronald Reagan giving a speech, and I'm giving my first, and it's like they're very proud of it. They know what's going on. And, it's just, so, George Jackson, the anniversary. Mick, I got to move along. Thank you for the call.
Remember John Lewis, find a good trouble.
There you go, good trouble. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for always being such a helpful, positive force.
I do my best.
You do. And Governor Inslee has issued a mask mandate for the whole state of Washington and a vaccine mandate for all the schools in Washington.
As did Governor Brown here in Oregon about a week ago.
Wonderful. That's how we need to do it. And I'm calling for handcuffs for Governor death sentence, putting people's lives at the brink of death so he can profit on his Regeneron. And now he's got the government paying for these people that did not get vaccinated, screwed it up, and he's got a football field of giving it, the government is paying for it while he's making money. And he's just like Trump. He's against Pfizer and Moderna. But his death sentence is making millions, and Abbott is making millions, and, endangerment of life. Somebody take out a class action against them. But also, Rand Paul, how is he getting away with insider trading? Martha Stewart went to prison for less than, he met in a private meeting with the government and knew what was going on, and he's got millions invested.
Yeah.
So, and there's one last thing.
Well, let me just, before you go to your one last thing, let me just give you another data point, talking about Rand Paul and his insider trading. I think this is even worse. Lauren Boebert, who got a seat on the Energy Committee, let me get the exact name for that committee. It's the House Natural Resources Committee. This is the committee that decides, whether or not oil and gas companies get to drill on public lands and things like that. Her husband made $478,000 in the first year that she was in Congress from this as a consultant to Terra Energy Production, and a company that does this kind of energy production. And then the following year, her husband made $460,000. So they basically gave her family $1 million. And apparently in exchange for that, she introduced a misleadingly titled bill called the Protecting American Energy Jobs Act, which would block President Biden from issuing moratoriums on oil and gas drilling. Oh. I mean, this is what Lauren Boebert is all about. Do the people in Colorado know this? I doubt it. It's just like, this is what Republicans do. It's a scam. It's just, they just run these scams.
They need to be held accountable. That's insane.
Yeah. And so anyway, I'd say there's a few other things here.
One really important thing, because I love you. You're so great. There is a website for donations for helping Haiti, and it's very simple. It's called coreresponse.org, and I'm giving to it, and I know you have lots of callers that would rather help out, and, we have such an awful world right now. So coreresponse.org, they'll take anything, $5, and,
You've double-checked this, Jessica, because you gave them because there's a bunch now. There's a big warning yesterday. There are a half a dozen or a dozen charities purporting to help resettle Afghan refugees that are scams.
Let me tell you something. It was on last night on the Colbert Show, and it is Sean Penn's organization.
Okay, thank you for that. Phew. Okay, good.
No, it's legit. I would never do that to you.
No, I know you would never intentionally do that, but, it's like the best of us can get, snookered. So, okay, good. Jessica, thank you for that, and I got to move on. Thank you very much. Mary in Mill Creek, Washington. Hey, Mary, what's on your mind?
Tom, I have something a little controversial. I was talking to somebody last night and had a kind of a epiphany, and I want you to help me tease through it, okay?
Okay.
I'm a very progressive. I am pro-choice all the way. One of the things that was being discussed is they challenged me that how can you say you're pro-choice and then turn around and say, I'm not going to let you have a choice about your vaccine. Because the premise of pro-choice is that you keep your hands off my body. I make my own personal decisions about my body.
No, but wait a minute. Here's the disconnect, Mary. If you are pregnant, that doesn't affect me. If you are contagious, that does affect me. So we're talking apples and oranges here.
However, I agree with you, except that, I did think this through quite a bit last night. I really tossed and turned about it because I thought, okay, now I have the right to say you will wear a mandate, or you will wear a mask, you will wear PPEs. That's not invasive, and those do help protect. Now, it's not the cure-all. I'm a nurse. I've worked at the UW, so I know all about the COVID, what is involved with it. I'm just saying that we do have a right to mandate anything that goes on us. But when we start to say invasive, that's when I feel like...
Mary, we fought this battle in 1777 when George Washington ordered the Continental Army to be vaccinated. We fought this battle in the 1950s. It wasn't even a battle with polio. We mandate a whole spectrum of vaccines. This is not this has nothing to do with the pro-choice movement, and the analogy to abortion is completely wrong. There is no analogy there. If a woman gets pregnant and chooses to have an abortion or chooses to carry that baby to term, that does not affect public health. That does not affect the people around her. It may affect her direct family in ways that are economic or emotional, but it's not going to get somebody sick, and it's not going to cause somebody to die. On the other hand, if a woman chooses not to get vaccinated and gets sick and spreads that to other family members and spreads that through the community, people die. The R value for this Delta variant is around 8. For every person who gets sick, they infect 8 more people. The R value for the original virus was 3. For every person who gets sick, they infect 3 people. The R value for somebody who's pregnant, they don't make anybody else pregnant.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just it's a logical fallacy, and so you need to tell your friend that they're full of baloney. It's just a logical fallacy. Mary, thank you for the call. Melissa in Denver. Hey, Melissa, what's up?
Hi, how are you? I'd like to talk about Afghanistan, and I have an ambassadorship with the World Peace Organization. A lot of my research is based on the book Afghan Kings and the Failure of U.S. Military Intervention by Carlos J.B. Caro. And the Bush administration made major strategic mistakes, missing chances at peace and stability in Afghanistan.
Well, Bush during the first three years did not want peace. He wanted a war to be raging when he ran for re-election because he knew that wartime presidents, Franklin Roosevelt got elected 4 times, right? He knew that wartime presidents get re-elected during wars.
Well, we don't need war profiteers in our government. And when FDR was president, he did bring heads of corporations into the White House to pull our resources together to beat the German Nazis. And they were supposed to leave after World War II. Right. However, he passed away in his 4th term, and Truman never carried through, and it evolved into the industrial war complex. And those are the conflicting objectives that they talk about in Afghanistan is, I believe, because of these war profiteers that create all these refugees and disasters all over the world. We cannot have them in our government. This is wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
And
we poured $1 trillion down the throat of the military-industrial complex. This is exactly
there's no public health care for our own people, and our taxes aren't coming back to us in services as they should for health care and things like that.
With the between $1 and $2 trillion that we spent in Afghanistan, certainly at least $3 trillion if you include Iraq, George Bush's wars that he lied us into, we could have eliminated all student debt in the United States, and we could have put into place a single-payer health care system that would cover everybody in this country. Melissa, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Your points are very well made. It's 48 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's Anything Goes Friday. Picking up your calls right after this. And welcome back. Marty in Evergreen Park, Illinois, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Marty. What's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I just had a thought. Why hasn't Biden placed the blame on the debacle of the evacuation in Afghanistan on President Trump? These were his policies that he put in place. He's just President Biden is just pretty much following through on the same, schedule that Trump started. Trump should have been evacuating, all of the translators and everybody else a long time before this. I mean,
Yeah.
Biden just got into office. So my question, I guess, is why is Biden taking ownership for mistakes he didn't even make? I mean, and this could have been a perfect opportunity to throw it back. And
I don't think
remind
that's
her-
his job. You know, I mean, I get it that if Donald Trump was president right now, he would be whining about how, this was because Obama didn't get us out of Afghanistan when he had an opportunity. By the way, there's a strong case to be made that, for 8 years, Obama could have dealt with this and chose not to. But that's, a whole nother argument. But, you expect that kind of whining from wimps like Donald Trump. But Joe Biden is doing what presidents should do. He's saying, I'm the commander-in-chief right now. I'm making the decisions right now, have been for the last 7 months, and therefore I own what's going on. Now, it is, in my opinion, important for the people around him, like the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, to be coming out and saying exactly what you're saying, Marty. That, and the other big thing that I didn't even know yesterday, I mean, I learned this last night after we got off the air, was that as part of Stephen Miller and Donald Trump's program to eliminate any immigration into the United States by people who were not white Europeans, they had essentially shut down this special immigrant visa program, this SIV program, for people who had worked for us in Afghanistan and Iraq, to whom we had made extensive promises. If you work with us side by side and fight the Taliban with us and act as a translator for X years, we will transport you and your family to the United States. And people took us up on that offer. And there was a backlog, according to this article that I was quoting earlier from Daily Kos, a backlog of over 1 million people, or excuse me, over 100,000 people, to be processed. And Trump just shut the whole thing down. Now, Biden turned it back on in February, but at that point, it was like, it was jammed. So that should be being pointed out left and right. But it's not the thing, it's not the sort of thing that Biden should be saying, in my opinion.
Right. Well, I mean, somebody needs to be getting that message out so that the Republicans don't, use it, and say, oh, well, this is ineffective leadership.
Well, I'm doing my best, Marty. Sadly, the giant megaphone of 3 right-wing television networks and 1,500 right-wing radio stations is not replicated on the left. There's a few good radio stations on the left, and there's Free Speech TV, which is a great little television network, but it's a little television network that doesn't much tell anybody about its existence. So, I'm doing my best, and I'm hopeful that people like Blinken or people like Jen Psaki, the White House spokesperson, will be saying these things. But I understand why Joe Biden isn't. He's trying to be presidential, and he's doing a good job of it. Marty, thank you for the call. Always nice to hear from you. We'll be back. It's 52 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, helping you win the water cooler wars. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So David Perry over at Medium.com put together a list of 38 reasons to investigate the Trump administration. Everything from the Russian influence over the 2016 election, to the Trump family's collusion with Russia, to Ivanka Trump's trademarks, to federal spending at Trump properties, to the civilians killed by Trump's drone strikes, to the Trump's administration's role in turning the United States into the global epicenter for the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, we are. Yes, it's grim. Their decision to sideline the CDC, politicizing mask wearing just to try to get himself reelected, the number of people who died because the White House kept PPE from blue states, from Democratic-led states, the contents of the Trump documents that Trump refused to release to the House Judiciary Committee and other committees, all the people who wouldn't speak, at all, ignoring subpoenas, violations of the Hatch Act, the deportation of COVID-positive immigrant families, illegal altering of records. Anyhow, there's a whole list. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And it's Anything Goes Friday, picking up your phone calls. And Ted in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. Hey, Ted, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I'm calling because of the previous caller, making the parallel between COVID and abortion, kind of. And I think she got it wrong. There's hypocrisy here, but it's on the pro-life side. And there are people that are willing to invade a woman's privacy to, prevent her from ending a pregnancy. But they're not willing to force people to even wear masks to save lives.
Right, but they will force her to have a vaginal ultrasound or to watch, some god-awful video or, basically humiliate herself just to get an abortion, basically, a medical treatment.
Or if they have the way to prevent it completely.
Right.
Right, and if they could, but they're, when it comes to wearing a mask or getting a vaccine, they're all pro-choice, they're, hey, it's my right.
Right.
They don't care about life.
Yeah.
They care about, that's my point.
They care about basically controlling the bodies of women. I mean, let's just be very clear. This is what the whole so-called pro-choice movement is all about, in my opinion. Ted,
the pro-life movement and the pro-life. Right.
Did I say pro-choice? I meant pro-life. Yeah.
Yeah, and this pro-life movement is that just lays bare the hypocrisy in one of the most dramatic ways I can imagine.
Yeah.
Mask versus abortion. Yeah. Which one saves more lives?
Yeah. Well said, Ted. Thank you very much for that. Mike in Ravenna, Ohio. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today? Mike? No Mike. Okay, let's try Randy in Bainbridge Island. Hey, Randy, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I want to talk a little bit about words matter. And I love the way you use your words well, and you care about things like accuracy, connecting the dots in historical context, and I and others learn a lot from you. I want to talk about freedom of speech, and it's the great American right, but it's also a responsibility, and it's been weaponized. And I believe terms like misinformation, fake news, gaslighting, these are all tactical terms on the play-by-play, and we need to move up in altitude and talk about PSYOPs, psychological operations, and psychological warfare.
Which is what the right has been waging against us for 30 years now, 40 years.
Right, and I would love to learn more on one of your shows about how this is being used on Americans, by Americans, and who's behind it.
Yeah. I can tell you who's behind it. You've got a group of right-wing billionaires who are funding all these think tanks and funding all these right-wing media and Rupert Murdoch and whatnot. Randy, thank you for the call. We'll be back with Anything Goes Friday.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
book for the Thom Hartmann Book Club today is A Nation Forged by Crisis, A New American History by Jay Sexton. And I'm reading from the introduction. This is page 9. The quest for national security and global power, America's shifting position in the international economy, and fluctuations in immigration have made the United States the nation that it is today. Americans' foreign relations have been conditioned its history not only in their cumulative effects over the long haul, but also as a result of their volatility. In periods of crisis, America's position in the world has lurched in unexpected directions. For as inexorable as the rise of the United States appears in retrospect, there have been contingent moments in which the very existence of our nation was up for grabs. This is the essence of crisis. The world turned upside down, the known replaced by the unknown, panic reigning as people struggle to maintain their balance and shifts in the very ground beneath their feet. It came with a speed and ferocity that left men dazed, New York Times correspondent Elliot Bell wrote of Wall Street's catastrophic collapse in October of 1929. Quote, the market seemed like an insensate thing that was wreaking a wild and pitiless revenge upon those who thought to master it, end quote. Crises are contagious, spreading like viruses from one realm to another. It's not without reason that the word crisis was associated with medical conditions and health scares in the 19th century. Each of the periods under consideration in this book were less a singular crisis than a set of interlinked crises. A political crisis could trigger an economic panic, which in turn could intensify social conflict, and so on. As these pandemics spread through the body politic, crisis itself was normalized, becoming an almost accepted characteristic of an age. Just as foreign crises have spread to the United States, domestic ones have spilled across its borders, unsettling foreign countries and peoples, as well as reconfiguring America's connections to the world. Consider the fateful winter of secession that followed the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln. The crisis over slavery that divided the Union into warring sections that led to a series of sharp reversals in America's position in the global system. The foreign capital that had rushed into the roaring American economy in the preceding decades suddenly began to flee. Indeed, more capital left the United States in 1860 to 1862 than came into it. Also a once-in-a-century occurrence. One of the world's most valuable commodities and America's largest exports, Southern cotton, was confined to the ports of the Confederacy as a result of Richmond's ill-fated diplomatic strategy, leading to unemployment and social unrest in the British textile town of Lancashire. The most unexpected reversal was how the national security that the United States had attained after the war against Mexico in the 1840s was suddenly imperiled, with European powers encroaching once again upon the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, the Confederate emissaries across the Atlantic were in search of alliance with Britain. Our country, Secretary of State William Seward lamented in early 1861, after having expelled all European powers from the continent, now threatened to relapse into an aggravated form of its colonial experience, and like India, Turkey, China, and Italy, become the theater of transatlantic intervention and rapacity. A wider view of American history that looks beyond the nation's borders brings into focus not only the migration patterns, economic flows, and international rivalries that have connected the United States to the world, but also those rare moments in which the very existence of the nation was in question. Perhaps none was more pregnant with implications than the autumn of 1877, when the fate of the Patriots' bid for independence hung in the balance. Having proclaimed their independence to the world the previous 4th of July, their cause had stalled on the battlefield and in the diplomatic courts of the old world. I think the game is pretty near up, Washington privately confessed at year's end. To accomplish their independence is not quite so easy as to declare it, the British philosopher Jeremy Bentham haughtily remarked. But then a series of events forever changed the course of modern history. The stunning Patriot victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October, the drafting of the Articles of Confederation in November that, for all its limitations, further demonstrated the political resolve of the Americans. And most of all, the alliance signed with France in February 1778, which provided the Patriots with the resources, military assistance, and naval power that ultimately tipped the scales in their favor. There are comparable Saratoga moments in other crises in U.S. history, as we shall see. These contingent moments played out in their own distinctive ways, but are joined by a common denominator that has been curiously forgotten in our age of U.S. global power. Foreign states and people have played decisive roles in the critical moments of American history. As we make our way through our own era of global instability, In an unprecedentedly interconnected world, there's perhaps no more important lesson from the past to keep in mind. Crisis may beget crisis, Franklin Roosevelt said, as his administration transitioned from battling the Great Depression to entering the Second World War. But the progress underneath does not wholly halt. It does go forward, end quote. Like so many of Roosevelt's public statements, this one reveals a truth even as it conceals others. The United States came out on the other side of its greatest crises as a stronger and more efficiently organized nation, as Roosevelt suggested. The process of mobilizing resources to counter threats catalyzed innovations in political economy, such as the creation of a national financial system during the Civil War, and the economic reforms of the New Deal. The book is A Nation Forged by Crisis by Jay Sexton.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you on Anything Goes Friday. I'll be picking up your phone calls in just a moment. I just want to share a couple quick stories with you. Number one, I mentioned yesterday about this family in California that died. Mother, dad, kid, dog. They all died camping in a national forest in a valley. And I was speculating that maybe this was an early warning for earthquakes or something, because sometimes you get these gas releases, carbon monoxide or even carbon dioxide. But it appears that there was an algae bloom. And now this is still speculation, but this is Mariposa County Sheriff, County Sheriff Jeremy Breeze is speculating that perhaps the global warming, the heat, all this kind of stuff is changing the nature of the streams or the lakes. And I don't recall which they were at, whether it was a stream or a lake, but they may well have just drank the water and it killed them. We'll find out. This is a story that is still evolving, but it's fascinating. One of the funniest memes I saw on Facebook yesterday, or actually somebody sent it to me that they took off Facebook. It's a photo of some cars driving down the road, and the headline says, "I don't turn on my headlights because," at night, right? Don't turn on my headlights at night when I'm driving because, number one, I am not a sheep. Number two, I refuse to live in fear. Number three, I can see just fine. Number four, I respect your choice to use your headlights, so respect my choice not to. Number five, if other drivers can't see me, that's not my problem, that's their problem. Number six, it may be a law, but it's unjust and it infringes on my constitutional rights to have my lights on at night when I'm driving. Number seven, I have a medical exemption and you are not allowed to ask me about it. And number eight, I am a member of the Freedom to Drive in the Dark Committee. On a less light note, Adam Schiff, I'm on his email list, and he sent out an email yesterday saying, this is about Louis DeJoy, the Postmaster General. Not only is he I'm quoting from Adam Schiff, congressman, the congressman from California. Not only is he, this be Louis DeJoy, under FBI investigation already, but the Washington Post just reported that the United States Postal Service signed a $120 million 5-year contract with XPO Logistics, a contracting company that DeJoy's family owns. What makes it worse, DeJoy maintains strong ties with that family business by renting out 4 office spaces to XPO Logistics, from which he personally earns at least $2.1 million every year. So the money goes from your and my buying stamps into the post office, out of the post office, and into XPO Logistics, which is owned by a family member of Louis DeJoy, who then pays Louis DeJoy $2.1 million every year to rent some office space for XPO Logistics on behalf of the U.S. Postal Service. Tell me this isn't criminal? Please? Okay, let's pick up your phone calls here. It is Anything Goes Friday. Dennis in Bergenfield, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, I'd like to ask about the minimum wage.
Go for it.
If 2 adults are working full-time, minimum wage, right, do you feel, and they live together, do you feel that they should be making enough to raise, let's say, 1 or 2 kids
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of the minimum wage.
Right. Because I guess some would say, like, oh, they should wait until they, go into a higher position or something.
They should live in poverty. No, I mean, either we respect work or we don't. And,
right.
I have no problem with somebody who has, additional education, and therefore they can become a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist or whatever, and, being paid more than somebody who is working as a truck driver or who is working at, not to put down truck drivers, I don't mean that in any way, or who is just, working at McDonald's, at the front counter at McDonald's. We reward that extra effort, particularly with regard to education in our society. But that doesn't mean that at the bottom of that scale, people should be living in poverty. We're the richest nation on earth. We can easily afford to make sure that everybody who is working full-time in this country can raise a family, can buy a house, can have health insurance and put their kids through school. This was Teddy Roosevelt. I used to play this clip on the air all the time, and I'm not going to. Actually, I was thinking of playing it right now, but we're having some weird audio gremlins in our system. But Teddy Roosevelt, back in the day, I mean, back many days ago, when he was pitching his square deal, his whole thing with the square deal was, let me see if I can find it here. Maybe I've even got it.
Yeah, there's a good quote.
Yeah, he was saying that his square deal idea, I'm not easily finding it, was that people should be able to raise their family, they should be able to buy a home, they should be able to take a vacation, they should be able to have their health care needs taken care of, and they should be able to provide for their own retirement and old age. Keep in mind, this was before Social Security. This was 1912 that Teddy Roosevelt was saying this, and it's just crazy that from 1912 to today. Actually, I do have the audio for that.
He was a Republican.
He was a Republican. Here, this is it right here. Hang on just a second. We can carry the audio.
We stand for a living wage.
We stand for a living wage.
Wages are subnormal if they fail to provide a living for those who devote their time and energy to industrial occupation.
Wages are subnormal if they fail to take care of people who have devoted themselves to industrial occupations. And here's where it goes. It's fairly bad audio. Thomas Edison himself recorded this in 1912 on a wax cylinder. But anyhow, this is a Republican president of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt. Let me just...
Stand for a living wage.
Here we go.
The monetary equivalent of a living wage varies according to local conditions.
The monetary equivalent varies according to local situations, conditions, but
must include enough to secure the elements of a normal standard of living.
Normal standard of living?
Standard high enough to make morality possible.
So you don't have to steal food, make morality possible?
Provide for education and recreation.
Provide for education and recreation.
Care for immature members of the family.
Care for immature members. You raise your children.
To maintain the family during periods of sickness.
Maintain the family during periods of sickness.
And to permit a reasonable saving for old age.
And to permit a reasonable saving for old age. That was over 100 years ago, 110 years ago, 111 years ago. And we're still having a fight about this? I mean, this is how bad it is, Dennis.
Yeah. How much we have to go now, or?
Say that again?
We have to go now. How much time we have left?
We're done. Dennis, thank you for the call. Dave in Hale, Michigan. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. You're talking to a first-time caller here.
Thank you.
To make it short, hey, with all your knowledge and everything, has it ever dawned on you why, what I'm looking at is I'd like to see Congress interviewing a so-called upcoming president on television at random questions, just like we do for nominating someone at the Supreme Court and so forth, like we did. So it's on the air. They're under oath, and they're telling you they're all experienced in which direction.
Well, that's what the media is supposed to do, Dave. I mean, that's the job of the media. Yeah. You don't want government inserting themselves into deciding who can and can't run for public office. This is very different from the Senate, offering advice and consent for a Supreme Court nominee.
No, I didn't mean that. I just wanted to know the kind of questions that they're going to ask, what they expect out of the president that's upcoming.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Constitution, the First Amendment of the Constitution, guarantees a free press, and part of the idea was that free press will hold to account people who want to serve, you know, in office, whether it's the highest office in the land or any inferior office, and that's really the job for the press. I get it that, you know, we got snookered with Trump. We got a con man for 4 years, and a lot of us want to do something about that. That's the press's job.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's Anything Goes Friday. We'll be right back. And welcome back. George in Portland, Oregon, listening on X-Ray FM. Hey, George, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Hey, I think that Democrats should be making the rounds right now comparing Trump's deal with the Taliban to Reagan's deal with Iran, just to bring that old treason back into the zeitgeist, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you hang on to the hostages, and we will sell you weapons, all you want. And, you know, and it worked. I think that the two most important things that we need to be highlighting right now are, number one, that George W. Bush lied us into this war, that, you know, if we just wanted to take down Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, well, both of them were in Pakistan at the time, on 9/11, first of all, and Mohammed Atta, who, you know, was engaged in the planning, he died in one of the planes, but that planning was done out of Jupiter, Florida. And, you know, I think that we need to point out, number one, that, you know, the first cause was the poisoned fruit, as it were. And then Donald Trump, you know, refused to process visa applications for Afghans who had worked with us for the better part of the last 2 years of his administration as part of Stephen Miller's plan to stop any more people of color from coming into the United States. And so he screwed up the visa program, and then he sold us out to the Taliban. And he just gave away the country. And it just needs to be said over and over and over again, in my humble opinion. So anyway, thank you for the call, George. Alan in Morongo Valley, California. Hey, Alan, what's up?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
I want to talk about the California recall election.
Go for it.
I feel it's heavily skewed in favor of Republicans, and here's the reason why. There are two questions on the ballot. First one is, should Governor Newsom be recalled? Second one is, who should replace him? And there's 46 candidates running for that.
Right.
This leads to a situation where Governor Newsom could lose question one by getting 49% of the vote, while his replacement could be elected to office
with 10% of the vote.
With 10% or less of the vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have a solution.
Okay.
The solution is all those opposed to the recall should cast a write-in ballot for Governor Newsom on question 2. I don't know why Democratic strategists
just vote no on the recall. You'd have to vote yes on the recall to have your question 2 vote recorded.
No, you don't.
Oh, really?
They're totally independent, and Governor Newsom is not on the question 2.
Oh, interesting. So if you write in Newsom, then that becomes a vote for Newsom even... Oh, that's interesting. You may be onto something, Alan. I mean, I'm not that familiar with California election law, and
the two questions are independent.
Yeah. I think what California really needs to do is they need to get this damn law off the books. I mean, this is the second time we've been snookered by this law. They used it to take down Gray Davis and replace him with Schwarzenegger, and that was being championed, of course, by Darrell Issa at the time, who thought he was going to be the nominee. He broke down in tears, literally, on camera, when Arnold Schwarzenegger announced his candidacy. And then, you know, the second time right now. This is it's just wrong. But that's fascinating. Alan, thank you. You know, hopefully a lot of people in California just heard what you had to say. And, you know, hey, it couldn't hurt, right? Couldn't hurt. We'll be back in just 1 minute. Stick around. Our 1 hour free podcast recaps our show, and it's available wherever fine podcasts are found. And we have the full 3 hour podcast available over at thomhartmann.com if you want to really support our program. Ask a boomer what it was like going to college back in the 60s and 70s and whether they had to go into debt to do it. And odds are they'll tell you that they not only didn't have to go into debt, in fact, college was free in California until Ronald Reagan became governor. Not only did they not have to go into debt, but, you know, you could pretty much work your way through college just with a part-time job. That is very much no longer the case. Only 8% of millennials and Gen Xers have never had a student loan. This is a crushing burden on these two generations, and it's time to clean it up. And when Americans were asked, what do you think? Should we just wipe the slate clean? Should we get rid of all this student debt? 60% of Americans said yes. And then, of course, the corollary of that would be, and then let's make college free, at least state colleges and community colleges. There's a whole video about this over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. You can check it out there. And welcome back. Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program. And picking up your calls, Richard in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I came up with this cockamamie idea of how exactly we wound up losing our lunch and everything else in Afghanistan. Okay. We went in there and we trained the wrong people to be in the Army. We went in and we trained the males, and we should have trained the females. They're better shots, and they got a lot more to lose than the males do.
Oh, my God, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. You know, there are some countries in the world where women make up a large part of the military. Israel is the one that comes immediately to mind. Wow, that's
they're not going to take any stuff, man. They're just they'll be vicious.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Richard, thank you very much for the call. That was fascinating. Steve in Houston, Texas. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Hey, it's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your show. And I wanted to talk to you about some of your books, a couple of your books I've read. I've had some time to read books. I've read Ancient Sunlights, JFK, Legacy of Secrecy. But I wanted to make a connection between Ancient Sunlight, and I'm reading a book about Thomas Aquinas, and I don't want to scare you about religion, but he mentions a whole lot about goodness of people. You know,
it was one of the major debates in the Catholic Church around the time that he was alive.
Yes.
What is the essential nature of man?
Exactly, and I mean, this was about 1,000 years ago when he wrote this stuff. And it's amazing how intelligent he was. He used a lot of Aristotle's teachings on metaphysics, you know, when he wrote his book with Science and Things. But basically, you know, he says that all humans really have this goodness in us, you know, something that the Creator or God gave us, you know, that we have that. And you make that connection, you know, in also Cracking the Code with John Locke and, you know, with his progressive movement. Now, there's...
Versus Thomas Hobbes, yes. And John Locke and Rousseau versus Hobbes and Burke.
And also, it's, you know, I had to read a little tutorial about Aquinas because it was a little difficult for me because of the terminology and stuff. I haven't been in college in years. But he did mention that John Locke and a lot of those progressive-type people used a lot of Aquinas' ideas as far as when they wrote their ideas about, you know, about the progressive movement and how people are and, you know, about God and nature, you know, with our founders and stuff. You know, they used all that about nature and, you know, their idea about God. But anyways, I was wanting to say, you know, that is, you know, that is really an optimistic look at it. And also in your Ancient Sunlight, you mentioned that too, about the ancient Indians and things, about, you know, how they worked together and took care of each other and stuff like that. And I think we all are hardwired for that. I think that's part of our nature.
We absolutely are. As are all communal animals, as are all social animals. You know, we're wired to support each other, to help each other out. And if you don't think that that's true, just, you know, get a bunch of, you know, 1.5-year-olds who are just, you know, barely verbal together in a room and, you know, give everybody one cookie. Everybody will be happy. Give one of them 10 cookies and give the rest of them no cookies or just one cookie, and you will see a very big change very rapidly.
Yes,
or treat somebody badly in front of other, you know, treat one child badly, you know, slightly injure them or make them cry or wound them in some way. Not that I would, you know, want to do that, but you get my point. In front of the other kids. The other kids will be outraged. They'll come to the defense of the child that you've hurt. This is how we're wired, to protect each other, to help each other. And when we stop, and when we, you know, the people who advocate that we shouldn't help each other, that, you know, I am not my brother's keeper, by and large, those are either, you know, poorly informed people, insanely selfish people, or just flat out psychopaths or sociopaths. You know, the Donald Trump types among us. Wounded people, injured people.
You know, and one of the differences I see in some of this progressive ideas, like with John Locke, is that Aquinas uses the causality. You know, that we all have purpose here, you know, on the planet. You know, and that you know, there was the first act that made the second act, and there was a first act. There was nothing before that, but everything else is being moved along. And, you know, they don't mention that. And also they mention that as far as this Aquinas book, that how we see nature now is that in this time we kind of use nature as a tool, you know, to make our life more comfortable. But, you know, the way Aquinas wrote it in some of these, in the ancient people, they didn't see it that way. They saw it as not something to use and to overcome.
Yeah, we are in a Cartesian world. You know, René Descartes basically posited that the entire world, all of nature, is a giant machine, and if we can just figure out where the levers are to pull, we can control it. And nature's not a machine. I can take my car apart and put it back together, and it'll run again. I can't take a cow apart and put it back together and have it moo again. And you know.
Exactly.
That's a good one.
That JFK book was wonderful. I couldn't put it down.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Thank you. Props to Lamar. Lamar did most of the work on that. I just did a lot of the footwork. Steve, I got to run, but thank you for the call, and thanks for your kind words. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Picking up your calls on this Anything Goes Friday right after this.
Today from a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs, or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience, with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space, excuse me. Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head, or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyessa, the American Indian was an individualist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by 4 arrows.
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So a while ago at Davos, Michael Dell, the computer billionaire who started out selling computers out of his dorm room in college. I was running CompuServe forums back in the day. This is in the late 70s or the early 80s, and he was selling them on CompuServe in my forums. And, now he's worth billions. And somebody asked him, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing a 70% tax bracket for people who make the kind of money you make. What do you think of that? And his response was, a 70% tax rate? Name a country where that ever worked. Ever. And it turns out there is such a country, and apparently Michael Bell didn't know this. I think a lot of Americans don't know this, that there was a country that had its greatest period of prosperity in its entire history with a top tax rate that was above 70%. In fact, it hit 90% for more than half the time. And that was the United States of America. It's in a new video over at ThomHartmann.com. Well, welcome back to Anything Goes Friday. And picking up your calls, Dr. Dave in Denver. Hey, Dr. Dave, what's up?
Oh, hello, sir. I'm a big fan. I'm a retired doctor from California. I fought the workers' comp system there for 17 years. I got an award. They said I had to go to a special needs trust, and I got robbed of over $130,000.
I don't understand. Why are you telling us this, Dave?
So people understand that the conservatorship situation, where they take all your assets, they have your power of attorney to do whatever they want to.
Right. Yeah. So, it can get very messy. Okay. Yeah. Message delivered. Thank you, Dave. Peter in Philadelphia. Hey, Peter. What's up?
Hey. Good afternoon, Tom.
Yeah, Peter. I'm going to put you back on hold, and you can talk to Joyce. Mike in Bailey, Colorado. Hey, Mike. What's up?
Hey, Tom. I was just wanting to confirm that gentleman's comment earlier about the women fighters. If you look at what happened in Syria before Trump handed it to Turkey, the Kurdish women that were part of their combatant forces terrified the ISIS war.
You're absolutely right. There were a lot of news stories about that. The female Kurdish brigades. Yeah, absolutely.
And they had the best snipers. They had the highest kill ratio for snipers. And another thing was, as soon as ISIS found out they were operating in their area, they ran.
Yeah. That's
and there were women actually in Afghanistan when they started seeing all the what was happening. There was groups of them that were actually had tried to campaign to set up a women's force to fight the Taliban. That was just a blip. That's all I heard of that. Never went anywhere. If they'd have been trained and armed, I have a feeling what has happened, you wouldn't have seen the 300,000 men just put their weapons down. They might have actually stood up and fought with these women that were fighting next to them.
Yeah, as the caller who suggested that said, they had the most to lose, with the Taliban, and the most to gain by fighting back. Hindsight's always 20/20, Mike, but it's a fascinating topic to dig into. Thank you for the call. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff. Carbon tax? Jeff? I got no Jeff. Let's try Marge in Galveston, Texas. Marge, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. This is, I'm trying to say it very fast. The Taliban are ideologically, have ideologic similarities with the Xinjiang Muslims of China and the Chechen rebels in Chechnya. Actually, some of the people who fight for ISIS and Daesh and Taliban are from those areas. Therefore, I think this evacuation from Afghanistan, the way it is, leaving all the military for Taliban, the military equipment for them, is striking three birds with one stone for the U.S. One is that pretty soon those fighters among Taliban who are from Xinjiang, Muslim population of China, will create problem for China along the border.
Well, this is why China has cracked down on the Uyghurs, who are Muslims.
Yes. And so this is one bird.
I mean, it's not that the Uyghurs have ever actually explicitly offered any kind of threat to the Chinese, to the best of my knowledge, but they were wary of them, I guess. So anyhow, continue, Marge. I'm sorry.
Yes, and second is in the border with Russia regarding the Chechen rebels. That will create another problem for the Russians, and obviously for Iran. They are not Sunni, and these equipment can create a lot of problems on the east border of Iran.
That assumes, Marge, that they can maintain that equipment and keep it operational. I mean, this is what happened when the Shah of Iran left Iran. It's why the Iranian government which mullah was it? But whatever, negotiated that deal with Ronald Reagan in 1980 because they had been without any sort of spare parts or maintenance for almost a year. And the Iranian military, which was entirely U.S. made, was their helicopters weren't working, their planes were breaking down, and they had run out of missiles, and so they needed Reagan to sell them that stuff, which is why he cut that deal where if they would screw Jimmy Carter, when he became president, he'd help them out, which became Iran-Contra.
I agree with you. Just I draw your attention towards the fact that there is 20 years that Americans are training Afghan people.
Yes.
So those trained people are currently in Afghanistan, and if, pressed, they might be, obliged to work for
Oh, no, I agree with you. What I'm saying is that as parts break down, as parts wear out, this isn't a matter of, human intelligence or software, as it were. This is a matter of physical hardware. Not just getting fuel, but also getting replacement tires for their jets. And, there's the military equipment, they burn through a lot of stuff.
Anyway, I think this evacuation is actually very, very good strategically for the U.S.
Good.
In the region.
Yeah.
The region.
I think so, too. And it's going to be real interesting to see how the region realigns itself. And my prediction, and I said this yesterday, is that China's going to come in. They're going to cut a deal with the Afghans, and because they don't care about human rights, they don't care what happens to women. They don't, none of that stuff matters to them. They just want the $1 trillion worth of lithium, and they're going to turn Afghanistan into the lithium version of Saudi Arabia and oil, and which they desperately need, or they would love to have, the Chinese, to build lithium-ion batteries for cars and homes and, all these other, everything's getting electrified. Yeah, spot on. Marge, thank you for the call. Phil in Austin, Texas. Hey, Phil, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I was just calling about an update to everything going on in Texas with the schools, and it's amazing how much the parents have hit back in a week. And it's really changing with local pressure on the ground. At the beginning of the week, we started off with 5 school districts that had imposed mask mandates. That number is now up to 70 plus. Wow. It's encompassing roughly 60% of the student body in the state of Texas.
Is this why your Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick was on? His first name is Dan, as I recall.
Dan Patrick. Yeah, he was on. What he said on Fox.
Yeah, he was on Fox News this morning saying that the COVID crisis is because of black people, or the hospitalization crisis, and why would he do something desperate like that?
I think everybody's heard the story of the Paris ISD, Independent School District, doing the dress code for the mask.
Yes.
What's not in any news story, and you can just look it up, on Dallas Media or anything like that. That county went 75% Trump in 2020. So they're losing the popular vote of the Republican support on this.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's something that's not being reported widely. After Greg Abbott caught COVID, and we saw the video of him and his donors, his statement basically said that they were contacting all the attendees. Well, the Texas Education Authority in Texas had previously said that if there's an outbreak at a school, we're not going to tell you, we're not going to notify you, we're not going to contact trace you. Their head lice policy,
Right.
They reversed that yesterday.
Oh, that's interesting. For statewide or just for that particular school district?
Yeah. I mean, that's the pressure going on by parents here, and it's
so
not
in the school district there in Austin.
I mean, we're all masked up. We're praying every day that there's not an outbreak, and for the safety of our kids. You know, I mean, it's every day when my daughter comes home, like, thank you.
Yeah,
for getting home, but
there absolutely will be. I mean, this is a nasty, highly contagious, very deadly, and very destructive
We're trying,
disease.
Tom.
Yeah, well, keep it up, Phil, and keep us up to date. I appreciate the call back and you know the update. Thank you, Phil in Austin, Texas. There. It'll be real interesting if, you know, what comes out of this is that the Trump holes, you know, the DeSantis's and Abbotts of the world just crash and burn politically because they killed so many people, or their policies did.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's going to be real interesting to see how this plays out. It's just so tragic that there's so much death and destruction in the midst of it. And welcome back. Rich in Cedar Woolley, Washington. Oh, Rich, you're listening on Sirius XM. Let me put you on hold, and I'll pick you up when Sirius XM is back on the air. Jeff in Portland, listening on X-Ray FM. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, happy Friday, Tom. You know, I'm glad people are calling in about the California recall. We all need to be focused on that.
Was that guy right that if you vote no, don't recall Newsom, you can still vote on who to replace him with?
Yes. Norman Solomon has a piece in Common Dreams yesterday about that. I would recommend. The Democratic candidate is very wishy-washy and would not be nearly as good as Newsom.
So you could write in Newsom.
Oh yeah, I guess you could, but I mean, I think it'll be hard. But you know,
mostly we need to get people out to vote to say no to the recall. I mean, this is the bottom line. If you don't want to see, if you don't want to see, you know, particularly a right-wing talk radio host crank, you know,
no doubt about it.
Not to dump on my own profession,
the world.
but
Controlling the world's fifth biggest economy. Yeah.
Right.
So, and you know, Tom, the reason I'm calling, you know, there's no doubt we need urgent steps to ameliorate the situation in Afghanistan with the interpreters and other allies and Americans still remaining. Rachel Maddow's opening statement on Wednesday really humanized their plight. But going back to Common Dreams, you know, they also have a piece by Medea Benjamin and Nicholas Davies today, and it asked the question, will Americans who are right on Afghanistan still be ignored? And, you know, as you've been saying all week, the corporate media is still refusing to ask questions about how we got into a 20-year bloody quagmire in the first place. Why did we give Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld a blank check for two endless wars? And when are we going to start listening to voices of peace like Barbara Lee and Medea Benjamins and former Nuremberg prosecutors Ben Ferencz?
And politicians, I mean, you know, Bernie Sanders and people like that were you know, sounding the warning bells back in 2001.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually Bernie did go along with. I think Barbara Lee was the lone
dissenting voice. You're right, in the House at that time.
Yeah, but I think she would have quite a bit more allies.
By the time it got to Iraq, everybody had figured out what the game was that George W. Bush was playing.
Yes, and you know, I would add, Tom, that with the corporate media's newfound concern for humanitarian crisis, why aren't they focusing on an end to the two blockades, the Cuban blockade and the Yemen blockade? You know, if they're worried about unnecessary human suffering, let's try and redirect this newfound concern to you know, people really unnecessarily going hungry and
is Saudi Arabia still blockading the ports in Yemen?
Yes.
Oh my God!
Yes.
I thought that had been resolved.
No.
So the famine in Yemen is rolling along.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And Biden could be doing a lot more to pressure the Saudis to end that. So
we should get somebody on who's an expert on that.
Well, I think Ro Khanna would be a great guy to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, and Mark Pocan's bill to redirect the military spending to COVID is great, and Barbara Lee has a similar thing to redirect military spending to domestic spending. So, you know, we need to keep the progressive pressure on.
All good.
Thanks for what you do, Tom.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks. Always a good rant when you call. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So people wonder, why militias all of a sudden? How is it that all kinds of Americans are showing up with assault weapons in the Capitol building trying to assassinate the Vice President of the United States and the Speaker of the House of Representatives and stop the counting of the presidential votes, the Electoral College votes? Where did this come from? You know, the last time we saw an armed uprising against the federal government in the United States was 1861. It was the Confederacy. Is this a Confederacy rising again? Well, yeah, there is a huge white supremacist element to it. In fact, I'd say it's one of the primary animating impulses. But what really got these things going, these militias going, was the Heller decision written by the opinion written by Anthony Scalia and published on June 26, 2008. And it has crazy language in it, basically begging for militias. I share it with you in a special video over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. Picking up your phone calls here, Rich in Central Woolley, Washington. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, earlier this week when you had the congressman on, he was talking about transferring funds from the defense budget to other causes that you could justify as part of national defense. I was thinking because the Defense Department relies on our tax dollars, why not borrow 10, 50, 100 million over to the IRS to do audits on the fat cats?
You know, what Donald Trump demonstrated was that may well be possible. He took $5 billion out of the defense budget that was supposed to, upgrade military housing and repair military housing that was falling apart in the United States and all around the world. He took that $5 billion out of there and said, we're going to build a wall on the Texas border, the Texas-Mexico border with it. So I think there's precedent, Rich. I can't always easily, I can't really tell the Biden administration what they should be doing, but you never know. Maybe they will be, maybe somebody's listening. Thanks a lot for the call. Keon in Stoughton, Virginia. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, well, sort of. Keon from Stoughton, Virginia.
Hey, Keon, what's up?
Oh, I just had a weird thought. I'm pro-vaccine, pro-mask, especially pro-mask, rather. And I just wanted to make a point and see if you had anything to say to it. Basically, I just wonder what do you think about the fact that we're all about unity. We're trying to bring people together, but this all-or-nothing approach to mandating things.
Which all-or-nothing approach are you referring to?
Either masks or vaccines, really either.
If you've got a virus that will wander all over the place, will escape from your breath and travel through air conditioning systems and travel around rooms, and you want to stop that virus, it really does have to be all or nothing. You go into a hospital and you've got a contagious disease, they're going to isolate you. It's just common sense, Ken, and I'm not quite buying this whole I'm on the side of this shtick. I got into one of these debates last night on Twitter with, I posted something. Can you imagine how bad it would feel if the last words you heard before you died were, hey, we need another bed over here in the hall for another unvaccinated idiot? And, some person responded going, oh, no, you're going to get this bizarre disease that some people get when they're vaccinated, long after the fact, as a response to the yellow fever vaccine. So I looked up the disease, and it's got nothing to do with COVID. It's got nothing to do with the COVID vaccine. It's unique to one particular vaccine for one particular disease that almost nobody ever gets, although I've had the yellow fever vaccine and have it to get into Uganda. So I point that out, and so then this person comes back and says, well, what about Dr. So-and-so who invented mRNA vaccines? And so I look up Dr. So-and-so, and no, he didn't invent it. He was part of a team that discovered one of the early liposomal pieces of it, and he's out there claiming that he's the inventor of it and pushing BS theories. And so I sent the Wikipedia link to her saying, this guy is like, a disinformation machine. He's on Twitter. He's got a presence on Twitter. And it's like at some point you just kind of bang your head against the wall and say, what? Anyway, Peter in Philadelphia. Peter, you are on the air, and thank you for calling.
Hey, no, thank you for taking my call, Tom. Very briefly, you had a caller earlier who was talking about a pro-life person questioning how, my body, my choice, why isn't it the same for unvaccinated people? And you pointed out the argument of contagion, which I 100% agree with. I think also impactful is the argument if they want to insist on the apples versus oranges approach, then let's also continue the discussion with the financing. If you want to say no federal funds for abortion, then there should be no federal funds for treating people who get COVID after choosing not to be vaccinated. Oh, by the way, if private institutions don't have to provide abortions or health care, private insurances don't have to pay for the treatment of COVID. You can still, and to quote Antonin Scalia, you can still get treated for COVID. You just have to pay for it. That was Antonin Scalia back in like 2004, 2005. So I would put their own argument right back on them. And not only will we get them vaccinated, we might make them pro-choice.
Oh, and back in the 80s, they played these same games with AIDS, and there was all, right. And they were saying, avoid homosexual diseases, wear masks. It's like, Nate printed out a thing earlier with, an actual graphic, a picture from back then when they were doing this. So.
And Tom, this will also open the discussion. I'm tired of blue states and blue people picking up the tab for the red states and the red people. Yeah. Let's get that discussion back out there as well.
Oh, yeah. Kentucky is getting over $2 for every dollar that they send to Washington, D.C. Yes. California, New York, they get pennies back for every dollar that they send. We are subsidizing the red states. We have been for probably a century.
Decades.
Yeah, there you go. Peter, thank you very much for the call. And spot on. And that was a great analogy. My apologies to everybody else who's on hold. We'll pick up your phone calls next week. What a week, right? It's kind of a crazy day, but what a crazy week. President Biden was on TV earlier, by the way, saying that we've taken 14,000 people out of Afghanistan. More to come. He's getting the situation under control. The Taliban doesn't seem to be interfering too much. We'll see how this plays out, but he was dealt a bad hand. I mean, a war that George W. Bush lied us into, and then Donald Trump shutting down the visa program for Afghan refugees or for Afghan people who worked with us 2 years ago. Anyhow, I'll do my thank yous on Monday, I promise. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at hellofresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. Wild Alaskan Company, delicious, sustainably sourced seafood delivered right to your door. More information at wildalaskancompany.com/Tom. And Mack Weldon, reinventing men's basics. More info at mackweldon.com/Tom.
We say fight back!